Tonight, we are kicking off our season with tales and histories of South Surry, that part of our town beginning at the carrying place and ending at the tip of Newbury Neck. The South Surry moniker may have fallen into disuse. Some people still use it, by the way. But tonight, the Historical Society will shine a light on that town within a town. I'm going to turn over to Catherine Engel.
Thank you. Can you hear me back here? Yes? Okay, great, thank you. A long, long time ago, the peninsula we now know as Newbury Neck was likely inhabited, or at least traversed, by the Wabanaki people. It was not until the early 1600s that the French explorers came to this region of Maine, began to settle here, and named the area Acadia. In the book written in 1878, A Survey of Hancock County, Maine, Surrey's historian Samuel Wasson stated that the appearances of old French settlements were found at Newbury Neck, as well as in other towns nearby. This gives credence to the claim that Newbury Neck was indeed once part of Acadia. After the British won the battle in Quebec in 1759, they started to reclaim the land in Maine that had been occupied by the French. In 1762, through the General Court of Massachusetts, that time Maine was part of Massachusetts until 1820, through that court, land grants were given to David Marsh to entice settlers to occupy the Maine territory. Leonard Jarvis was sent to manage the distribution of the land. We know that Hezekiah Coggins, who was born in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, came to Blue Hill with his father, Captain Thomas Coggins, by 1768, when Hezekiah was about 12 years old. And just an aside, the Blue Hill Hospital, beautiful building that was just torn down, that once belonged to Captain Thomas Coggins. Hezekiah married in 1778, and all of his children, his 7 children, were born here in Township 6, the first in 1779 and the last in 1802, just 1 year before Township 6 became incorporated and was named Surry. In 1997, Anne Robinson Dolan researched the history of the 4 neighborhoods in Surry as a project for her master's degree at the University of Southern Maine. She found that by 1803, Abijah Curtis, his wife, and 11 children had moved to South Surry from Newbury, Massachusetts. It is claimed that they named Newbury Neck for their hometown. Newbury Neck has also been called No Man's Cave. Okay, sorry. This map is purposely upside down, but this is Surrey, and anyway, it's Otter's tail squatters because that tail, and you can see on your map that some of you have, that it looked like an otter's tail. And it was squatters because the residents there were very poor. They survived by farming and hunting and fishing. By 1810, 2 other family names, Haskell and Hopkins, became prominent in the self-sufficient neighborhood of South Surry. With the first survey of land in 1828, there were 6 occupied houses on the neck. By 1850, there were 44 heads of families. There have been businesses such as a post office, a shipyard, mines, and stores. There have also been social organizations, a library, and a church in South Surrey's past. As part of her master's project, Anne interviewed some Surrey residents. For the Newbury Neck piece, she interviewed Russell Stevens. who lived on the Newbury Neck Road. She writes, "It was clear that Russell felt duty-bound to set a few records straight. When I explained that I needed a voice from Newbury Neck, he frowned. Well, you don't have one here, you know. I'm no necker. I believe the neck doesn't really start until you hit the carrying place." And that's the picture of the carrying place, as you probably all well know. He said, "I'm not one anyway. They used to all be too poor. Now they're all too rich." She asked him what occupations or businesses there were in the old days on the neck. He replied, "Anything to feed the family. Logging, pulpwood, berries, jacking clams, way down the neck, crabs and lobsters. There aren't clams anymore. No more smelts. Nothing here to do for a young person anymore except caretaker for some family, maybe." When Anne asked Russell what happened to all the old families, he replied, "Gone. Just gone. The Coggins brothers were the last, I guess." Yes, they are gone, but not forgotten. Tonight we want to share some of the old folklore and the lore of South Surrey's history to keep the past in the present. John?
First, a word about the Newbury Neck Road itself. The Newbury Neck Road originally went down to Morgan's Bay, then onto the crossroad, and then onto the end of the neck. The dates for this are uncertain, but we know that in 1820, at the request of a Joseph Wormwood, the selectmen approved a road to be laid out from the county road, that would be where the Morgan's Bay Road meets the Blue Hill Road, to Wormwood's house, where it dead-ended. Wormwood, a relative of Kathy Engel, lived near where Kathy lives today at 108 Newbury Neck Road. This was apparently the beginning of the Newbury Neck Road, as a spur off of the county road. We also know that in 1903, the town meeting voted to allow a Charles H. Emery to change the road at the carrying place to the west of his building and avoid the Muck Hole Bridge at his own expense. I don't really know much about that, but apparently there was a bridge on the old road over the Muck Hole. Maybe we can find out more about that later. And if anyone has noticed, at the beginning of the Newbury Neck Road there's a new signpost. Anyone notice? There used to be a signpost that shared the Morgan's Bay sign and the Newbury Neck sign. It was always a little askew. And I can't tell you how many people stopped at my house to ask me which was which. Today, I think it must have just happened, I noticed that there are two poles and there was no question as to which road is which. The South Surry Grammar School was built in 1826. The location is highlighted as SH on your map, for those of you who have maps. I've highlighted it in yellow along with some other items. South Surry was designated District 1. At this time, there were 6 other districts in Surrey as well. In a Surrey Selectmen's book from 1822, which we recently acquired, it was donated to the Society by Mary Chase. Thank you, Mary. We know that 67 students were taught at the South Surry School in that year of 1822. The village only had 51 students. Only the East Surrey School had more, but that's because in 1822, Surrey's boundaries extended up to the Union River and greatly increased the population of East Surrey. We have a photo of one of the teachers from the South Surry School. Her name is Miss Lizzie Gray. And we also know that in the 15 years between 1903 and 1918, there were 18 different teachers who worked at that school. Many teaching, most teaching for just one term or only part of a term. We don't really know the reason for that. The pay probably wasn't good, or perhaps the kids were too unruly or something. The South Surry School closed permanently in 1918 as the number of students fell below the required minimum. There was a state minimum for this. The few remaining students were reassigned to District 2, where the school was located at Rich's Corner, the intersection of the Crossroad and the Newbury Neck Road. This school closed down later in 1828, and all of the remaining students were assigned to the Old Village School.
1928, not 18.
I'm sorry, 1928. Please correct me if I do that again. I'll just do that.
Yes, I was confused because my grandmother taught at that school and she's not that old.
My apologies.
They were not that old.
Sorry. So the town provided transportation for them to come up to the village. During a fierce snowstorm on February 20th, 1934, the school bus, driven by Justin Frost, left the village at noon, but it did not arrive in South Surry until after 3 o'clock. Many kids had to walk the last half mile through the snowdrifts. James Moody brought the youngest boy, Linwood Young, on his back to his home. South Surrey's Union Church was built in 1855. It sat directly across the Newbury Neck Road from the Bayview Cemetery. After it was no longer used for worship, it was put to other uses in the community, and you'll hear more about that from another speaker. The cemetery. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Bayview Cemetery. The oldest known stone at Bayview is dated 1806 and memorializes Hezekiah Coggins, shown here. And there are a couple more slides of old stones. Coggins. Coggins again. Large family. Post office. South Surry had its own post office. The South Surry Post Office was established in 1874 with F.H. Hardin as the first postmaster. It operated for 60 years until 1934. Rosie Coggins was appointed postmaster in 1903, Edward Curtis in 1912, Lyman Curtis in 1917. It was discontinued in 1934. We believe that Clifford Coggins was the last postmaster. This is a picture of the Coggins, the last Coggins homestead on Newbury Neck. It was still standing when I was a young child. I was born in 1950, but it eventually rotted down or fell down and was knocked down. It's not there now. It's near the Coggins Farm Road, if you notice that on your travels. This is a receipt from the money order book, South Surry, Maine. They didn't have zip codes then, so don't look for that. Claude Bonzi, whose photograph is over the exit door, or the entrance door. The years covered were 1929 to 1934 in that money order book. The entry that I was going to show is a typical entry. And if you believe that the present surge in online shopping is something new, consider that shopping for other than day-to-day items was virtually impossible in a community as isolated as South Surry. So people used catalogs to order, not online but offline, and delivery was effected through the post office, somewhat like today. Most of the names that were shown on that slide were descendants of original settlers in Surrey. And for instance, Clifford Coggins had a money order made out to the Bangor Publishing Company. Perhaps he was renewing his subscription to the Bangor Daily News. Beloved Surrey teacher Rena Bonzi got a money order for Sears and Roebuck. Perhaps she was buying a winter coat. And Bert Young, perhaps, was buying a new pair of boots from Montgomery Ward. Most of the entries for the money orders were mail order companies, or the Bangor Publishing Company, or for taxes. South Surry did have several stores. Colonel William Coggins had a store at his shipyard at the tip of Newbury Neck. After the shipyard closed down, the Cogginses had a store across the road from their home, which you saw earlier. At some point, Postmaster F.H. Harden also had a store in the community. I think at a different time. I don't think there were two together. And I'm going to turn this over to Kathy Hinkle again.
This was the record of the entries from the Secretary's notebook of this Helping Hands Society.
Kathy, can you speak?
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And so the Helping Hands Society was organized on April 6, 1883 in South Surrey. And I would like to show you a few of the entries from this book, the organization and what they did and who was in it. So, a group of 4 ladies organized the Helping Hand. The Constitution and bylaws were laid out, and the purpose was stated as, the object of this society shall be to aid such purposes as will be deemed most necessary by a majority of its members. The regular meetings were to be held on Saturday afternoons. The public was not allowed to attend meetings unless invited by a member, and the work that they did was not allowed to be exhibited to any person outside the society. Or were these helping hands helping themselves too? Next slide. Gives you an idea. The dues were going to be 10 cents, and they would be requested to give the value of 1 yard print and a spool of thread. So, this was a legitimate sewing circle group. The first officers of the society were Miss Ida Coggins, president, Miss Gertie G. Haskell, both vice president and second director, Miss Leslie Curtis, both secretary and treasurer, and Miss Eva E. Clark, first director. At the very next meeting, it was voted to receive Miss Rosie Gray as a member, and she was appointed secretary. And most of the entries in this book were written by her. As mentioned, the meetings were held regularly on Saturday afternoons to do the quilting or other handiwork at someone's home or at the South Surry School Johnny showed you. The first fundraiser was discussed on June 30th, 1883, and was to be held on July 4th, at a dinner and a fair for the purpose of disposing of the articles made by the ladies. Apparently not a lot of time was needed to put on an event in those days. Proceeds from that were to benefit the society. Meetings were adjourned on July in 1983 until the next summer, quote, when the members would be home to attend. So the 12th meeting of the society was held May 31st, 1984. There are only a few entries from May to July of that year due to the absence of members. And records of meetings did not start again until January 1887. Yeah, what happened in those 3 years? This is a slide from the minutes of that first meeting in 1887. Do you notice anything different about the names? Perhaps it explains why members were not available previous years. Mrs. There were apparently some marriages that took place during that interim. We know that Rosie Gray married William Coggins in 1885, and the marriage of Bertie Haskell and George Beatty was noted in the January 6 Ellsworth American. At that first meeting of 1887, it was voted to have a supper and sale as soon as arrangements could be made. And later they voted to have the supper and sale of handiwork at the schoolhouse on February 10th, and proceeds now would go to buy a carpet for the church that John showed you. By common consent, they voted to receive more new members, including married ladies, since 2 of them had been married, and some gentlemen. I suspect there was a need for help in arranging and putting on those suppers. I'm not sure that the gentlemen contributed to the sewing efforts. Possibly, but doubtful. The February 10th festival was a success. $17.40 were made after expenses. And not only was the supper successful at raising money, but also at the next meeting of the society, there were 32 in attendance and 7 new members. So the society was beginning to expand. March meetings were mainly about the business of measuring and seeing how many yards of carpet would be required to put in the church. They voted to send to the wholesale houses in Boston. Johnny talked about the mail order from the post office, the South Surry post office. And they also voted to borrow $3 from Mr. Harden, who owned the store there, to finish paying for the said carpet. It was a self-contained South Surry community. April 1887 was the 31st and last meeting recorded until March 12th of 1908, when some ladies met with Rosie Coggins to reorganize the Helping Hand Society. The reorganized society had new officers, new names: Lena Cunningham, Jenny Bonzi, Rosie Coggins still, Hattie Curtis, Anna Gray, and Nora Young. They held 16 meetings, but did not have regular meetings after July 2nd, 1908, and did not meet again until August 5th, 1910, at the Union Church. Just because they didn't meet in those 2 years didn't mean South Surry was not busy. Oatley Gray had a fine new horse, so apparently there was farming going on. Lyman Curtis is here in his schooner, loading wood, so apparently the shipping was still in business. A meeting was held at the church Friday evening to hear the report of the committee appointed to give estimates to the cost of work upon a new foundation for the church. After hearing the report, it was voted to give the work to Charles Ells of Surrey, work to be commenced as soon as possible. The named committee was Hollis Bonzi, Calvin Young, and Charles Cunningham. It was appointed to see that the contract is properly carried out. Mrs. R.A. Coggins, that was Rosie, was appointed as a committee of one to solicit the funds for the repairs. And at the close of the meeting, ice cream and cake were served, and William Thorne gave some fine selections on his graphophone. And if no one knows what a graphophone is, it's the new and improved gramophone. August 5th, 1910. One noticeable difference in the recording of the meetings in 1910 was now clearly Newbury Neck was on the entries, not South Surry. New officers were Miss Hattie Curtis, Mrs. Flora Trugy, Miss Olive Bonzi, and Mrs. Nora Young. No directors any longer. August 10th, it was reported that they had a supper and sale, and quite a few were present from other parts of town. In late August, members voted to have another supper and sale at the Union Church on August 31st. They also were to open an account with Daniel McKay, the store in the Surrey Village. They raised dues to 50 cents and agreed to give money to support the work of the church. The society was also raising money to help paint the Bayview Cemetery fence. Also, dues increased to 50 cents a year. They voted to have the supper, and again, the event was a success, and it was noted that Mrs. Burt Wager drew the quilt, for which there were 25 tickets, sold at 10 cents each. 2 aprons, a few collars, and a crocheted mat were sold. And about 15 attended from Morgan's Bay. That was a hint that by 1910, South Surry was beginning to change, no longer as isolated or as self-sufficient as it once had been. On December 26th of that year, 1910, there was a Christmas tree and a supper, and only a few attended. The 29th and final meeting of the reorganized Helping Hand Society that was recorded mentioned that a few squares of patchwork were made. I can just imagine the fun this sewing circle group of friends had as they made beautiful quilts and other items to help provide what was needed to improve South Surrey. This is the final entry in this book. It was signed by Clifford Coggins 18 years later. South Surry, Maine, September 1st, 1928. Received from Helping Hand Society $21 to be used for cemetery purposes. Clifford C. Coggins. Clifford was Rosie's and Willie Coggins' son, and one of the Coggins brothers that Russell Stevens mentioned. This book also lists all the names and dates of when all the members of the society joined from April 6, 1887 to the last official member joining on August 5, 1910. It's here for you to look at if you would like to see that list. I'd like just to mention that the niece of Olive Bonzi is here with us tonight, and in just a few minutes she will be presenting as well.